You want to give us a little clap so we know when? Boom. Welcome to the Player to Coach podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hill, and actually for the first time in person alongside me, my good friend, former teammate, now co-host, Jordan Alexander. This is episode 23. Jordan, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. This is really exciting to just kind of like be here in person. I almost feel like we're on a broadcast and there's supposed to be like a game behind us right now that we're getting ready for. But
It kind of does feel. I still don't know if we look at the camera or at each other. I think we kind of alternate is probably what's going to happen.
yeah.
And if you're listening and not watching, this is going to be quite the experience for you because I imagine there's going to be a little bit more to get out of it on the video, but here we go. So
Yeah.
like I said, this is episode 23 is the Jordan episode. Primarily Michael Jordan because he's the real 23, but also Jordan. I mean, someone that you were named after. So,
True.
Take it how you want it.
Very true. Yeah, named after him. Fun fact for the pod, I am literally named after Michael Jordan. I have the same middle name as him too, which is Jeffrey, since you can find that on Google anyway, so I might as well just say it.
There we go.
Yeah, pretty cool.
There we go.
Yeah, this is fun. We're inside the Bushnell men's basketball coach's office right now.
Oh yeah.
Not going to show everything because we got scouting report stuff and recruits and all that, but you can get the background of the wall and TV and stools. So
Yeah. Get a little bit of an insider look here.
a little bit.
Kind of like what was that show? Cribs? No, something like that.
MTV Cribs.
Yes, MTV Cribs. I was close. It's kind of an inside look along those lines. We just finished up practice. I basically just sat there and watched, which was very reminiscent. If you watch our last episode, it's very reminiscent of my time here, but still felt right at home. But give us a little breakdown of how practice went today, and
I think it definitely had its ups and downs. You could probably see that from observing.
Yeah.
We never, ever have to coach effort here. That's not something that we worry about. So it wasn't even that. Just like some of our execution, we got to get better at certain things if we're going to, get to where we want to get to this season. So a lot of details to be figured out offensively and defensively. And we're getting ready for a homestand this weekend of back-to-back games on Friday and Saturday night. So big weekend for us. And, just trying to get ready. But a little inconsistent today, and that's okay. We'll have a better one tomorrow, I think. So.
There we go. That's what it's about. Very early in the season still, so we still have those ebbs and flows, and still trying to get everyone on the same page. You got new recruits, you got transfers, you got people coming from every different background and play style and everything. So I can imagine that it would take a little bit for you guys to get on the same page.
Yeah.
It's a little bit about what Jordan's talking about there, and just like with every other team, it's 15, 16, 17, 18 guys trying to do the same thing. It's going to take a little while.
Yep.
For some teams, they never fully get it, and the best teams, they do, and they run with it. So it's the name of the game.
Yeah.
How's your Thanksgiving? We can talk a little bit of life. How's your Thanksgiving? What did you do? How much did you eat?
Thanksgiving was good. We're at the at my in-laws' house here in town. Watched a lot of football. Watched the Phil Knight tournaments that were up in Portland this last week. Basically all day. I watched that from like 10 a.m. to 11:30 at night, my time. Ate a lot of food. I had 2 plates, which I've had more in the past, but I was very satisfied. Food was good, so that was fun. And just good time with family. I really enjoy the holiday year and the holiday time of year. So, what about you? Obviously, you're out here, so.
I am out here, and here would be Eugene, Oregon. So Thanksgiving Day was a very long day. So I got up. So I live in Chicago, so we're Central Time. Woke up at like 2:30, 2:45 a.m. to catch a flight at 6. Flew to Seattle, connected.
This was on Thanksgiving?
This was on Thanksgiving morning. We're delayed 3 hours, and one of the weirdest things that had ever happened, our gate moved like actually 8 times. So we were like, not only just like, oh, is it B7 or B8 or whatever? It was like, nope, we're going over to A wing, going over to B wing, back to A wing. It was, we like just sat, we ended up just sitting in the middle. We're like, it's going to change again. We're just going to wait till freaking boarding happens and then we're going to go because it's not going to change again.
Sounds like fun.
So that was awesome. We got in probably like 1 Pacific time, and then went to my parents' house, had Thanksgiving, and then we went over to Caitlin's parents' house, who thankfully lived really close by to my parents. So we had 2 Thanksgivings and a travel day in the same day. So, combination of like 4 or 5 slices of pie and like probably 4 plates total. And, travel day, waking up at 2:30 a.m. Central, I was in almost an actual coma. I was so tired. So very tired. Just a lot of scheduling, seeing family. It's always fun to see a lot of people, but you always feel bad about splitting time when you're away. And I haven't been back here in like a year and a half, so want to see a lot of people, but also don't want to go back to Chicago and be absolutely just demolished energy wise. So yeah, it's a good time. But yeah. Well, we didn't want to talk too much about, regular podcast stuff. We've, obviously it was our first chance to do it in person. Want to get a chance to catch up on life. But something that we kind of ended the podcast with last week was just kind of talking about being successful in the league, and something that I kind of started to hint at. But we didn't want to do until we had a full episode's chance. But just talking about holding not only just players and coaches accountable for wins and losses, and that's not just over the course of a season, but over the course of an extended period of time. I think with shows on ESPN like First Take and stuff like that, we talk quite a bit about coaches and players. Something that I'm a little bit more passionate about, or not more passionate about, but I would like to see more of is more conversation about front offices, GMs, or for high schools and colleges, athletic directors. There's a lot of other people that are involved in the success of a program, and I think oftentimes get looked over a little bit. And that's more just the teams that seem to can't get over the hump and they kind of stay down for a really long time. You can kind of look farther and farther up the ladder there. Yeah, that's just something that's been on my mind a little bit lately. Like for myself, I'm a big Portland fan. I grew up here in Oregon, and so naturally I'm a Portland fan. And you see a guy like Damian Lillard, who is an all-world talent. And when you're a small market team like Portland and you don't draw in those big free agents, you either have to hit in the draft or you have to make trades, and probably you're going to have to overpay people. And I think this is kind of where the Warriors have kind of broken the idea of like, like give them more time. They're a small market team. And like, while the Warriors aren't exactly a small market team, they've been more than willing to pay into the luxury tax to fit the bill of those big players. And so I think they've just kind of set the standard of, hey, like if you really want to go for it, you can. It's just, ownership. They might have to take a little bit of a hit on the profits that they make on this business, which it is a business. But yeah, I'm big on the idea of, hey, obviously, players probably have the biggest effect on, wins and losses, and coaches right after that. But then, man, I mean, it's an organization, it's a whole school. Really, everything's a part of the process of success.
Yeah. Well, I think this conversation goes a lot deeper with the professional sports, obviously. Because owners and GMs are in the public eye a little bit more, and we know names a little bit more about Portland or big city teams or whatever, rather than like a college or a university. But yeah, it's crazy because, and we've talked about this stuff before, and I know I've talked about this with how players are, but people forget that an organization like the NBA it's a business. And you have people making decisions behind closed doors that do trickle down to the players on the floor that we get to watch on TV. And you don't really think about that stuff unless you're really interested in it. So yeah, it's just kind of crazy to see. I think what like the Cavs when they won in 2016, I literally think that they like lost money that year as an organization. Um, but that was a sacrifice they were willing to make basically to get a championship. Um, and on the flip side, like the Warriors won this last year, and I literally think that they made money, even though they paid into the luxury tax. They still made
Yeah.
money. So, yeah, you have business decisions being made from the top down, and it's really common to hear like things start from the top down, um, and kind of like the attitude of an ownership group or an owner, and then the attitude and the approach by a general manager, and how they want to build the team and who they want their coach to be to coach this team of players that they've put together. And then you have some organizations where I feel like coaches have a lot of say in like the draft room, or even sometimes players have a say in the draft room. Like, funny example is like this last year, like Draymond Green's literally in the Warriors draft room, and he's like helping draft players, and he's on the team. So you just see different types of organizations and how they run things, and like who has a voice in organizations and all of that. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's for the conversations that do happen. I think they happen a little bit more on the professional level. I was talking with my father-in-law about this, a little bit ago. Just trying to brainstorm some different ideas of like if you were to picture yourself at like a college or a high school, and you're an athletic director or someone who's kind of that front office role per se in a school setting. Like what are kind of the effects that you can have on a program if they're struggling? Um, like if you consistently have some programs that just do well, and they have, um, you know, coaches that are also teachers there and really involved, and they've
Right.
been there for a long time, versus some other programs that just keep churning out coaches and, just can't seem to find a sustained success. Like what are kind of the things that you can really do to kind of get your hands a little bit more involved and
Yeah.
kind of take like a failing program, like personally, like, hey, I'm an athletic director for the school and this program is failing. I need to step in and get involved in some way. So I'm not sure how much on the athletic director side you know about or have been involved in, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on different ways that the front office per se of a school could get involved and to really affect winning, really.
Yeah. That's interesting. I really do think like a big part of just like sports, but also like high school sports more specifically, is like funding. Like you have some high schools, right, who
Yeah.
have a big fund for like a football program, or you have high schools who have a big fund for a basketball program or a baseball or whatever it is, right? Um, so I think that plays a big role. Sometimes you can see like what's important to a school and where like a lot of the money goes and how they fundraise for like their team to go travel and play like in a preseason tournament, or like something as simple as like how much gear do they get, um, that kind of stuff. I honestly do think that that can affect winning,
Yeah, I agree.
um, because it encourages or makes it more fun for the players, and if they're having more fun, then um, they're going to work harder, honestly, and they're going to have a better attitude and things like that, especially at that age. Um, in high school specifically. I also think like a big part of being a high school AD is like who you hire as your coach, because there's good coaches out there at the high school level. There's also bad coaches, and there's good and bad at every level, um, respectively. So yeah, I think that it's interesting. Like here locally, right? Like we grew up here in Eugene. Um, typically, your coach is a teacher at the school or within the school district. Um, which is not the norm for everywhere you go. Um,
Yeah.
Also, kind of depends on the sport too, and sometimes you're giving yourself limited options if you're like, oh, I have to hire a teacher, because maybe there is a better coach that is out there that isn't a teacher.
Yeah.
So I think things like that are like the first things that come into my head. Um, it's really hard. I haven't really thought about it much at the high school level of like how an AD can affect it, but being involved too, uh, like with the program and showing your face. I knew who like my high school athletic director was, and so that was really cool.
Yeah.
He was at all the games, especially all the home games. You'd see him on campus during the day, things like that. Having like an open door policy, I think, is really cool too, if you can afford to do that, where it's like pretty welcoming. I know we have that at our university right now at Bushnell. Our athletic directors have an open door policy for staff, faculty, players, or athletes, which is really neat. So things like that help you build better chemistry and relationships with your AD, and maybe they pour more into their programs, right? Just because there's a relationship there. So things like that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head in that last point about relationship. I think I've got a chance to be a part of several different schools, and you can definitely see the difference in like as far as trust, success. I think a lot of those things just come from having a relationship, and there's coaches that don't really talk to their AD much more than they have to. Much more than the like, okay, like let's set our schedule, let's do all these things that we have to do, like make sure we get all of our jersey orders in. But then it's just kind of a little bit of a disconnect, which I think is a loss on both ends of. Coach might not know that he could have, more resources, more tools, more support from an AD, and vice versa. If something goes wrong and the AD doesn't really know exactly what's going on, through conversations with that coach or, being more involved in actually seeing it yourself, I just think that leaves the window open for, like maybe this guy just isn't good. We just need to, fire him. Or like really, what if he just needed more support in this area? What if he's new and just like doesn't like he really knows the game or whatever sport they coach, but they don't know the inner workings of the back end of being a coach. And that's a we talked to your dad about it, and I feel like I reference it all the time. But he talked about like maybe like I think it was like 5 or 10% of being a head coach is like actually in a game coaching. Anyway, but just the overall idea that there's more into the success of a program or an organization on the pro level than just the players and coaches, and it's something that I feel like just isn't talked about enough. Is not only in the successes, but when programs seem to fail and seem to have a little bit of a lack of competitiveness, like I feel like I really gravitate towards being a fan of teams or organizations that are willing to like make a risky move after a while. If like they really haven't made a big push in a while to really shake things up, rather than be a team who's like, hey, like we're probably going to make the playoffs this year, and being settled with that, versus like, hey, I'm against tanking. I feel like there's ways around it as far as the NBA goes, and as far as like other pro sports, I feel like there's ways to draft well and trade players for picks and do whatever to get higher picks rather than tanking. I'm totally against tanking, but I just think that there's so many other options to be able to become, more successful, more competitive.
Right.
Anyway, I just feel like it needs to be talked about a little bit more.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one thing too, and it's weird to say this because these like organizations have a lot of money, right? But kind of like a small-minded way of thinking sometimes. I feel like you can see like. And what I mean by that is they struggle to see the areas where they can grow and go after them. It's just like you're a Blazer fan, and I didn't grow up like a Blazers fan or anything, for example, okay? But I also like at the same time like cheering for them. I want them to do well because it's the local team. And I know we've mentioned this before, but they had such a missed opportunity and a missed window, I think. Like, it wasn't working with Dame and CJ. It wasn't, right? And I just think that they waited a little bit too long to really get anything great out of it. And they're having a pretty good year right now. Don't get me wrong. Like, they are.
Yeah.
But, like, within the last few years, like, the lack of wanting to take a risk, like you just said, I really think it hurt them, because I think they could have gotten a lot more a couple years ago. And yeah, it's just crazy. Like, you can hold on to something so long, and that kind of goes down to like the high school level too. Like, if you're holding on to traditions or the way things have been, or holding on to a coach or things like that, instead of like changing things up just because it's a habit and this is how it is. Like, if it's not working, it's not working. You got to fix stuff. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just think maybe there should be like GM should also have a record.
Yeah.
I feel like that's never attached. But I mean, anytime you see, what's LeBron's record in the finals, or like what's this coach's record in these situations, but it's like, hey, like GMs and owners and organizations and executive, like they have records too,
Mm-hmm.
and so. And for the Portland situation, like I've been a Portland fan for a while, and I'm not going to speak for all Portland fans, but I'm kind of at the point of where it's like we don't deserve to have Lillard. Like he's one of the rare guys who's very loyal, but I'd feel pretty happy for him if he got out and went to a different team that like really loaded up and like gave him a legit chance, because I think he's the type of talent who can be a number one and win a title, but you need more to surround him with.
Right.
And there just hasn't been that. Like I don't think him and CJ were a terrible match by any means, but after a while you could see that it wasn't going to get it done.
Right.
And so they move on, and he's going to stay there, and they are playing well now. I don't think really anybody thinks of them as a title contender.
No, not at all.
And that's kind of where I'm at of like, hey, like, can you stop stringing this idea of like, hey, we're going to be kind of competitive for a long time? Like we don't want that.
Right.
We want to make a big change, and it's like, hey, even if you make a big change and it, drops off quite a bit, it's like, dang, like at least we're freaking trying, and like maybe it's gonna lead to something in the future, whatever. But this like mediocrity is frustrating, and I think we can look at and point to coaches and players a lot, but like even like I'm not a Packers fan by any means, but I like watching Rodgers play. But even this year, like what was everybody thinking on the trade deadline? Like they're like receivers are hurt all over the place. Like they need a weapon. Like they haven't drafted number one in forever. All this stuff, and then they just choose to do nothing. Where it's like clearly there's a need there.
Right.
Like objectively there's a need. And they like quote unquote tried to go get somebody. It's like, what does that even mean? You tried.
Right.
Like with an athlete, it's like, oh, you tried to play good defense. It's like, oh, you did or you didn't, and so I just think that's something that I don't see getting talked about enough, and I think more people who are in positions of power that don't make a competitive move just gets under my skin. It really does.
Well, I can't imagine being in that position because I haven't been, but like being a GM or an owner, it's high risk, high reward.
For sure.
And your job can be on the line, right? So, like, if the risk doesn't work, then you could be done. And so a lot of times I feel like you see, like, the safe play. Because you go with what you got and you try to stick it out and see if it'll work. That's safer. But it's just, it's crazy. You see so many different types of people in those positions. Like you got GMs in the NBA who love to pile up draft picks, and you got GMs in the NBA that are like, let's pay the luxury tax and win a championship. And you got GMs like I grew up a Lakers fan, right? I've been pretty open about that. And like the Buss family, it's gone through different people within that family, and they've always been an organization, in my opinion, that's like tried to buy championships right now, in the now, and they never really did a good job of like building for the future. Where on the flip side, you have other organizations like Philadelphia within the last decade who was like constantly trying to build for the future. Well, that process never like fulfilled itself. And the Lakers did basically, get some championships out of it, during the Kobe era. But then you can kind of see the trickle down effect of what happened in years after. Like they weren't in the playoffs for a very long time. And then now they've traded away all their young talent that they did have, and it's a struggle bus this year, trying to buy championships back. With the wrong combination of guys. So there's just so many different ways to go about it, and I think that's why you see a lot of safe decisions being made, because it's safer in the NBA to buy and have a contract for an NBA superstar. Why? Because it puts butts in seats. right?
For sure.
And so, yeah, like, it's just really interesting. There's so many different types of people in those jobs, and none of them are the same, I don't think. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think to your Lakers point, like I saw this on a post the other day, just listing through all the different players that they had drafted in the last several years and all the ones that they kind of let go, to make that push for Anthony Davis and the push for those other guys where, did get a ring out of it initially. And, those other guys are playing really well elsewhere. Like, you can kind of look out of that, a few different ways of, like, why didn't they just keep on to those guys? Like, can you imagine the team that they would have had? But like any given offseason, you think that the Lakers are going to be in it because they make so many moves.
Right.
They make LA has really, really high expectations for success. And you can tell that they act differently because of it. And, I think that all plays into it. Like, you get a city like Detroit where, like, expectations aren't incredibly high. Like last time they really had success was 2003.
Mid-2000s,
and then obviously back into the 80s and 90s they had their run, but like as of late, like, they don't have high expectations, so you can't get there's not a ton of pressure to do anything spectacular to try to like really shake things up where hey, they're looking for a minute small progressive increase when, like, in reality, like, stuff needs to like really change.
Right.
Well,
like, the Lakers thought they were making right decisions, right? Like, everything is so much easier to talk about in hindsight.
Right.
Like, who knows if Brandon Ingram would have like developed into the player that he is now? Who knows if Kuzma and I mean, I hate to say it because I liked when he was there, but like Lonzo Ball has not been available.
Yeah.
Right? Like, your best ability is your availability. And so would these injuries be happening if he was still in LA? Who knows? So, it's just really interesting. A lot of guys come and go in that situation specifically. And those are decisions that have to be made by the front office. So,
for sure. All right. Anything else you want to get off your chest?
No, I don't think so. Well, I was just thinking about this. We were just talking about the Lakers. I'll say this one thing. I would be surprised if there wasn't a move that they make before the trade deadline. I would be surprised. And I know this isn't a Lakers podcast, but if we're making predictions about the NBA, I would hope as a fan, and I would be, shocked if they didn't. I feel like they have to make a move. I think it's pretty obvious that they're not really serious contenders right now. They've had some better nights since, we've talked about them last time. And Westbrook has played a lot better. He had a good stretch of games when LeBron was out.
Anthony Davis came alive.
Yeah, he had some good games too. So it's interesting, but I don't think that they're a serious contender still. And if they're really trying to get to that point, they got to make some sort of move. And so I would just be shocked and disappointed if it didn't happen by the deadline.
For sure. But I mean, looking in recent history, I think there's a legitimate reason for Lakers fans to feel like cheated out of a chance of, advancing or like fixing the roster, or kind of like you're saying, just being like extremely disappointed when there's plenty of other organizations that have this hope every year that or kind of this unrealistic hope that maybe this is the year that we actually make a big change, because it's not, just like we were saying a little bit ago, like the expectation just isn't there. They don't have as much pressure for success like LA does. And, there's a lot of teams that have been hoping and wishing for a big change for a long time, and it never comes.
Yep. Very true.
Anyway, there we go.
It's been fun. It's been nice to have you here in person.
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, we won't be able to see the second half of the podcast, but that's okay. A little bit of technical difficulties there, but that's fine. But yeah, a lot of fun to do it in person, and I'll see you back when I'm in Chicago over Zoom, and we'll keep this thing rolling.
Yep, sounds great.
For sure. All right, dude.